You are listening to Mining Stock Education.
One of the biggest headlines, CATL, which is China's largest producer of automobiles and batteries and fully integrated, they just went out for tender on 500,000 tons of LFP cathode active material. And that was quite earth-shattering. It shows that the industry is really growing at the growth rates that, have been projected out there, which, are quite staggering growth rates, sometimes 20-30% per year. Some people say higher. So that lends, tremendous credence to sort of our argument. And also the need to onshore this in North America. We do need to have production here locally, and we do need to have a footprint here locally.
Thanks for tuning in to Mining Stock Education. I'm your host, Bill Powers. And in today's show, we're getting an update from one of our newer sponsors, First Phosphate, and its CEO, director, and founder, John Passalacqua. John, I got great feedback from our last interview. That interview, by the way, I'll link in the show notes if you didn't listen to it and you want a thorough overview of the company. But as I'm going to ask you to just give the thumbnail overview again for those that haven't heard, one of the main feedbacks that came back in different form was, Bill, is the company as unique as John is presenting it relative to other phosphate companies? And is the narrative as strong in terms of the demand for purified phosphoric acid the way John presented it?
First Phosphate is a mineral exploration development company, specifically 100% geared towards phosphate, high purity igneous phosphate, for the production of LFP cathode active materials for the LFP battery. So that will help me to sort of get into some of your other questions. So, what is the LFP battery? Well, LFP batteries now, lithium-iron-phosphate batteries, are about, 3/4 of all the batteries produced on the planet. And most of those batteries are produced out of China. So obviously there's big impetus to onshore that supply chain into North America. And if you remember when there was a spat between Trump and Xi threatened to cut off three things: rare earth materials. Number two was microchip technology. And number three, he said LFP technology. So LFP technology, lithium iron phosphate technology, is one of China's largest exports. It goes into all the battery energy storage units, AI data center batteries, batteries for mobility and robotics and other applications. It is very important. It is very important also because, you have people like Elon Musk who have come out and said that, if the U.S. could only better manage its energy grid, it could probably double its energy output. And these batteries are what do that, right? They help you to store energy. And they're even more important now because of the way that things are working with renewables, such as solar or wind. You only get that when, Mother Nature gives it to you. So when you get a lot of it, you have to store it and then redistribute it. That's important. And also, if you look at the big rally in the lithium stocks as of late, why are they all rallying? Well, they're all rallying because of energy storage and data center requirements for batteries. And that is almost 100% LFP battery. But they're always thinking about the lithium, but they forget about the phosphate. And in fact, in the cathode of an LFP battery, only 4% of it is lithium, 35% is iron, and about 60% is phosphate, high purity phosphate, which is very difficult to get to because it's the highest form of phosphate, and you can only make it from very pure phosphate material. There's some of this phosphate that's made on the back of the fertilizer industry, but it's only about 10 or 20% of that sort of sedimentary feedstock that can be converted into this purified phosphoric acid for batteries. But with the stock that we have out of Saguenay, Quebec, which is igneous phosphate rock, almost 100% of it gets converted into this purified phosphoric acid for batteries.
Mm-hmm. And so relative to others, what I said in conversation to some that were questioning, I said, you have to look at their partners. You have to look at the proximity they are to infrastructure as they articulate their plan. And then the third P, if we want to stay with the P's, is the PPA that you're able to produce from your igneous rock, not the sedimentary phosphate.
Yeah, correct. And, we said this before, and I know your viewer had questioned that, but we are truly the only company that I know of that's 100% dedicated to phosphate for LFP battery. We're not interested, nor do we have any affiliation with the fertilizer industry. We try to stay away from that as much as possible. We are a smaller deposit. We're closer to infrastructure. And the reason for that is we just want to be dedicated to the LFP battery industry and not to the fertilizer industry. And that's the reason for this high purity igneous rock, which is almost too pure for the fertilizer industry, but excellent for battery grade phosphate.
So one of your partners is an offtake partners. You have an offtake agreement. and you received a payment recently over $500,000 US prepayment. What was behind that decision to take a prepayment at this point?
Yeah, so basically, it was really more the decision of the off-taker that wanted to show that they were serious, because we had an off-take agreement in place for about a year. And now that they saw that we had raised all the funds that are required to do our feasibility study, they wanted to come up to the plate and show us a gesture of goodwill. And they put up small deposits to show that, they're with us and they're also contributing to that feasibility study if and when it decides to go forward after our last 30,000 meters of drilling will be done here in the upcoming months, and we will have defined our full resource.
You raised money or completed raising money since we last spoke. What is the update there, and how far will that money take you?
Yeah, so our last raise was at 90 cents. It was just before the Christmas break. We raised about $10 million. And we had also raised another approximately 20 to 25 million earlier in the year. So the company, and there were also a number of warrants that were exercised by December 31st. So the company's in a very good cash position. There's about $24 million on the books right now. And with that, we were able to get right through our feasibility study and a good chunk of the way through our permitting. The feasibility study is scheduled for December of this year, December of 2026. It's a very aggressive timeline. We're pretty comfortable to be able to hit it. And then permitting will commence in early 2027.
So that money will take you through then. And then the financial investment decision, Q1 of next year?
Correct.
Okay. What else are you doing this year in addition to the feasibility study? Are you working on your other project, or what other things does the company have going on?
Yeah, so we've got, obviously we're finishing up the drilling program. We're finishing up our larger metallurgical sample and metallurgy that will be important for building out the concentrator at some point. We're also working on our environmentals, which will be necessary for the feasibility study. And we continue to advance our downstream projects, which is the phosphoric acid plant and the LFP cathode active materials plant as well.
A question that did come in also was, why is the company listed on the CSE and not at least the TSXV?
Well, I get that question. I find the CSE is a great exchange. We're very happy with it. We're very happy with the people there. I don't think it's a matter of if there's a company better or worse because it's listed on one exchange or another. I think all Canadian exchanges are what they are. We recently were given inclusion in the CSE 25 index. So we are within the top 25 companies on the CSE. So it's good to be, a bigger fish and perhaps a little bit of a smaller pond. If anything, I think, the important thing is to see, where our other trading is taking place. The Frankfurt Stock Exchange, we're trading about 300,000 shares a day, as well as on the OTCQX, we trade about another 200 to 300,000 shares a day. And we're doing great liquidity on the CSE. We trade almost 1 million shares a day on the CSE. So between all those venues, there's about, 1.5 million shares, about $1.5 million of stock trading on a daily basis. And we're quite happy with it. So, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And we also respect our relationships. We have a great relationship with the CSE. These people treated us very, very well. And there's really no need for us to change it.
Yeah. And that question, as you know, comes from some skepticism of investors being burned by CSE companies in the past. And I know it can happen on any exchange, but there is a perception that it could happen more often on the CSE rather than the TSXV.
Oh, I see. No, I did not know about that. Like you said, I'm sure you can get burned anywhere. But CSE's got some great companies, as do all the other exchanges. And, if anything, we're proud to be one of those companies that raises the profile of the CSE. Why not?
Mm-hmm. And with the inclusion as the top 25, does that have a lot to do with volume, or are there other metrics that they look at?
I think they look primarily at market cap, but volume is also important. So basically those two metrics, yeah.
So management for your company pays themselves in RSU and options. And in one of your press releases, you mentioned that a payment to the First Nations group on whose land you're exploring and developing, you issued shares, over 240,000 shares. So even to your partners in that regard, you issue share payments, not cash?
Yeah. So, to start with management. So first of all of our board and a good portion of our management are paid in RSUs. I've only ever been paid in RSUs, and I'm proud of that. It just helps the company, right, to advance, where all the funds that are raised can make their way into exploration and development. In terms of our indigenous partners, the Pequot First Nations community, we have an agreement with them that a certain portion of the exploration activities that we conduct on the First Nations homelands, if you will, is then contributed back to them in shares at the end of the year. That's the way you would have seen on December 31st. There would have been that calculation, and based on that, they get a certain amount of shares in the company. It's the second time that we've done this.
Okay. John, another question after our first interview. Your PEA stage project, not your primary project, but your second one that's a little farther away from infrastructure. Would you consider that selling that in order to fund your plant and your primary project?
Yeah, good question. So that the PEA on Lac L'Orignal, which is our other property, it's a good PEA. There's some expanded drilling that can be done in that area. I don't know what the future of that will be. We were hoping to hold it as, our second property, because we know there's going to be a need for a lot of phosphate. Obviously, we're developing our primary property, the one that we think is closest to infrastructure, has the better grades and the better overall economics and dynamics. But Lac L'Orignal is certainly a very valuable project. It's one that we could certainly see developing ourselves at some point, or joint venturing with somebody. I don't think we would ever, quite sell it off unless, of course, we could remain involved. We're very committed to the Saguenay-Lac-Saint-Jean region, and we're very committed to the development of the phosphate industry.
What can you say about international interest that you're getting in the project and the company?
Well, quite a bit of it, right? We're doing really well with investors in Europe and in North America. Our off-taker is obviously overseas as well. Obviously there's a lot of, the battery space is quite connected worldwide. It's got a lot of Asian focus, got a lot of European focus, a lot of North American focus. We're in contact, and we get contacted by all kinds of companies all over those three trade blocks.
What are some of the biggest headlines in the phosphate world, and speaking to the demand for phosphate since we last chatted?
Yeah, one of the biggest headlines, CATL, which is China's largest producer of automobiles and batteries and fully integrated, they just went out for tender on 500,000 tons of LFP cathode active material. And that was quite earth-shattering, because, it was thought that, up to date about 1 million to pops 1.2 million, 1.3 million, maybe up as high as 1.5 million tons of LFP cathode active material are produced on a per annum basis. So when they come out and suddenly, come out with a bit, asking for a tender on another 500,000 tons, shows that the industry is really growing at the growth rates that, have been projected out there, which, are quite staggering growth rates. That's 20-30% per year. Some people say higher. It just shows good buoyancy for the industry. And it attaches also to this lithium theme, right? Where price of lithium has been going up because there's just such a demand. And everybody knows that all that demand is really predicated on LFP battery, right? And most of it on storage, which is, LFP, Lithium-Iron-Phosphate. So that lends, tremendous credence to sort of our argument. And also the need to onshore this in North America. We do need to have production here locally, and we do need to have a footprint here locally.
John, another question that came in: how soon does the company, do you plan to uplist to the major stock exchange in New York? Do you have plans to? Would you even do it this year?
Look, I'm not going to comment on that. We're always looking at new options out there, but certainly I would say that most companies in Canada, it is by design, something that they aspire to, which is to go to one of the exchanges in the United States. I often do see, Bill, companies doing that transition a little bit too early and a little bit undercapitalized. So we'd be very careful about making that kind of transition when we're properly capitalized and when we're ready for it, and without having to go through some of the stock consolidations that these other companies have to go through in order to do that, and then they end up in a worse position. So we'd certainly look at uplisting on the U.S. exchanges only if we believe that it'll put our shareholders in a better position afterwards.
Is there any other update you would like to provide listeners in the last 6 weeks that I didn't ask you about?
Oh, well, okay. So I think the best update up there is, we see, the real resurgence of lithium out there, right? And the resurgence of lithium in terms of the commodity price and all the stocks that are trading around it. Viewers have about, 150 choices for lithium companies traded around worldwide exchanges. But when you really ask yourself about phosphate, right? Phosphate, which is 60% of the cathode of the LFP battery, whereas lithium is only 4%. And then the remaining iron, the 35%. Where are we going to go to get the phosphate, right? How do we unlock this phosphate? How do we unlock this lithium without the phosphate? And I think case in point is that news release out of CATL, which, they were looking for 500,000 tons of LFP cathode active material, right? And that in turn requires lithium, but it also requires phosphate and iron. So I just really urge everybody to really focus on those headlines and focus on the phosphate and where are we going to get the phosphate? And then just look around, which are the companies that are dedicated to phosphate and just for LFP battery. As far as I know, it's only First Phosphate out there.
The company's website, again, is firstphosphate.com. They're a new show sponsor. You can find them under the ticker symbol at PHOS on the CSE and on the OTCQX for United States listeners under FRSPF. John, thank you for this sponsor update, and we'll be talking to you throughout the year.
Yeah, thank you, Bill. Great to be here. And thank you for all the great questions from your listeners. I look forward to more of them.